Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that one of the world's most famous law enforcement agencies began with just a small group of special agents, originally called the Bureau of Investigation, and then grew to become the FBI in 1935? Learn that today, the FBI employs more than 38,000 people working to protect the United States from crime, terrorism, espionage, cyber threats, and other dangers. Discover that the FBI includes scientists, intelligence analysts, language specialists, and technology experts who created one of the world's first crime laboratories and national fingerprint databases, and has recovered thousands of priceless stolen works of art while protecting the Constitution and enforcing federal laws. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here, and we've got a really wild topic today.
We really do. So I want you to picture the modern FBI. You probably think of like international terrorism task forces, cyber tracking, or even they track animal abuse now.
Right, massive scale. Highly sophisticated.
Exactly. But if we dig into our historical notes today, the roots of all that federal investigation power actually trace back to something completely unexpected.
Oh, totally unexpected.
Yeah, it traces back to the American Civil War, specifically to a group known as the Treasury Girls, who were literally just hired to sit there and cut money with scissors.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, honestly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to trace how this tiny, almost ad hoc crew of investigators morphed into this massive, 38,000-person crime-fighting machine we know today.
And it really is a machine now.
It is, and we'll also look at what that evolution tells us about safety, law enforcement, and even spiritual obedience.
Yeah, there's a really interesting philosophical angle in the sources we'll get into later.
For sure. But before we understand today's highly structured FBI, we kind of have to look at the absolute chaos that existed before it, like the Wild West of federal law enforcement.
Yeah, pre-1908, it was a mess.
Right. So the Department of Justice, the DOJ, was created in 1870. But they had a major problem, right?
A huge problem. They didn't have any actual investigators.
Which is crazy.
Right. The DOJ relied entirely on private detectives to investigate federal crimes.
It's like a modern tech company having absolutely no internal IT department, right?
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Like, imagine your servers go down and you just start calling random freelance geeks whenever something breaks.
Yeah, and paying them whatever they demand with, zero loyalty or accountability.
Exactly. But before the DOJ even existed, the Treasury Department was dealing with their own mess.
Yes, counterfeiting.
Right. So in 1862, they passed the Legal Tender Act to fund the Civil War, which meant printing an insane amount of paper money.
Unprecedented amounts. And naturally, people started faking it.
Right. So in 1865, the Treasury Department was formed to fight counterfeiting. And they needed people to process and trim all this currency.
But all the men were off fighting in the Civil War.
Exactly. So they hire these women, the Treasury Girls, to trim the currency, and they were just incredibly efficient.
They proved that having dedicated internal federal workers was just way better than outsourcing.
Right. So what does this all mean for how they finally centralized this power in the justice system?
Well, the outsourcing to private detectives just wasn't sustainable. It was corrupt. So finally, on July 26, 1908, which is actually celebrated as the FBI's official beginning, things changed.
Oh, okay. So who pulled the trigger on that?
President Theodore Roosevelt and his Attorney General, Charles J. Bonaparte. They officially founded what they called the Special Agent Force.
Special Agent Force, okay.
Yeah. Bonaparte started recruiting former detectives and Secret Service members, but bringing them in-house. And they all reported to a guy named Chief Examiner Stanley W. Finch.
Got it. But they weren't calling it the FBI yet, right?
No, the name went through a few iterations. Under Bonaparte's successor, George Wickersham, it became the Bureau of Investigation, or the BOI.
Right, the BOI.
Then in 1933, it was the Division of Investigation, the DOI. And finally, in 1935, they landed on the FBI.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Exactly. And the whole reason for this shift was simple. The government urgently needed dedicated internal federal power. You just can't rely on ad hoc private eyes to enforce the law of the land.
Makes total sense. So now they have this centralized agency, but the country was changing so fast, right?
Oh, incredibly fast. The nature of crime was mutating.
Right. So in the early days, like the 1910s, what were they actually looking into?
It was mostly administrative stuff.
Hmm.
Banking, bankruptcy, naturalization, antitrust issues, land fraud.
A lot of paperwork, basically.
Yeah, lots of ledger checking. But then 1917 happens.
World War One.
Exactly. And suddenly the scope expands massively. They are tasked with investigating draft resistors and violators of the Espionage Act, which meant preventing secret info from reaching enemies.
So they went from checking land deeds to hunting potential spies.
Basically overnight. And then, right after the war, we get into what historians call the lawless years.
Ah, the 1920s, the Prohibition era.
Right. From roughly 1921 to 1933, the public just completely disregarded alcohol laws.
Yeah.
And the gangsters took over.
Which means the Bureau is suddenly dealing with organized crime syndicates.
Yeah, and local police were often either corrupt or totally outgunned.
I read this part in the notes and it blew my mind. They went after Al Capone, right?
They did.
But they didn't go after him for murder or bootlegging. They pursued him as a, what was it, a fugitive federal witness?
Yes, a fugitive federal witness.
Which is wild. Like, how does that legal workaround help the Bureau flex its jurisdictional muscle? Why chase a mob boss for a missed court date?
What's fascinating here is that the Bureau had to actively find legal loopholes like that.
Because they couldn't just arrest him for local crimes.
Exactly. Local murder wasn't a federal crime. If a criminal committed a crime in one state and just drove across the border to another, the local cops couldn't catch them.
They just outran the local police jurisdiction.
Right. So the Bureau used things like crossing state lines to evade prosecution as a hook. It was a way to catch criminals who thought they were untouchable.
That is so clever, just exploiting the state lines.
Yeah, and it worked. And they also went after the Ku Klux Klan during this time for persecuting Black Americans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So by expanding their mandate to anything crossing state lines, the force grew rapidly to over 300 agents.
Okay, so you have this massive expansion. They're chasing mobsters, investigating the KKK, dealing with spies. You need a completely different kind of management for that, right?
Oh, absolutely. You need serious infrastructure.
Which brings us to the guy who basically built the machine, J. Edgar Hoover.
Yes, J. Edgar Hoover. He joined the DOJ back in 1917 as a lawyer.
And he had a very strong ideology, right?
Very much so. He was staunchly anti-communist, and he moved up fast. By May 10, 1924, he was appointed acting general director.
And he completely restructured the place.
He tore it down to the studs. He implemented strict rules. Agents had to be between 25 and 35 years old.
Okay, that's specific.
And they had to have either law or accounting experience, plus formal training.
Accounting? Really?
Yeah, you follow the money to catch the mobsters.
Oh, that makes sense. So he's professionalizing them.
Right. And he brought in science. He built a central fingerprint file, a state-of-the-art crime lab.
Which is amazing for law enforcement. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So in 1925, Hoover writes this piece saying that agents must, merit the respect and sympathy of the public if they want to enforce the law.
Right, a big PR push.
Yeah.
The clean-cut G-man image.
Exactly. But at the exact same time, he's saying that publicly, privately, he's building this massive secretive surveillance apparatus.
The massive index system.
Yeah, like the notes say, by 1921, he had 450,000 files on radical leaders and communist publications.
500,000 files, all physical index cards.
That's insane. And it resulted in 10,000 suspects being arrested or questioned. So how did he get away with that duality, being Mr. Public Relations while running this shadow surveillance machine?
Well, he was incredibly savvy. You look at Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer during that same era.
Right, the Palmer raids?
Exactly. Palmer was heavily criticized for abusing his power. But Hoover managed to avoid the blame entirely.
He just stayed in the shadows while his bosses took the heat.
Pretty much. And his power just kept growing. By the end of the 1920s, there were 30 field offices and 9 divisional headquarters.
Wow.
And he stayed in power for decades. He served under 8 U.S. presidents.
8 presidents. The amount of secrets he must have known.
It's too much power for one person. Congress eventually realized that and passed a law limiting all future directors to a 10-year term.
Yeah, that seems like a necessary safeguard to prevent that from happening again.
For sure. But because he was there so long, he left a very distinct culture behind.
Oh, right. The jargon. I loved this part of the source material.
The slang is great.
Yeah. They called street investigators brick agents.
Brick agents, yeah. And the public called them feds, G-men, and even 007s.
007s, that's funny. But it was a very rigid culture, right? Like a boys' club.
Extremely. Despite the Treasury girls proving women's capabilities back in the Civil War, under Hoover's entire tenure, only 3 women served as agents.
Only 3. Wow.
And he had strict rules for them. They had to wear skirts or dresses, and they were completely prohibited from smoking.
That is just wild to think about compared to today.
Oh, night and day. Today, the FBI is this diverse force of over 38,000 people.
And it's not just lawyers and accountants anymore.
No, they have intelligence analysts, scientists, language specialists.
Yeah.
The threats are so diverse now.
And their units are so specific, like the art theft unit.
That one is so cool.
It is. The notes say they've recovered 2,600 items worth $150 million, including like Rembrandts and Picassos.
Imagine being an FBI agent specializing in Picassos.
Right. And then there's the animal abuse tracking, which started in January 2016. They track 4 different types of animal abuse.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes perfect sense.
Because animal abuse is linked to violent crime, right?
Exactly. Criminologists know it's a precursor to things like serial murder. So the quirky internal jargon and these highly specific units like art theft or animal abuse, they perfectly reflect the modern mission statement.
They have to be specialized to respond to what the public needs.
Right. They have to adapt, just like they adapt their most wanted list.
Oh my gosh, the most wanted list. I used to think people just cycled on and off that list all the time.
Nope. The rules are incredibly strict.
Yeah, it's like an incredibly exclusive club that you absolutely never want to join.
Never.
Because according to the sources, you are only removed if you're captured, if you die, or if the charges are dropped.
That's it. Those are the only 3 ways out.
It's intense, and obviously their modern mission is huge, protecting against terrorist threats, foreign intelligence, all while upholding the Constitution.
It's a massive umbrella of protection.
It is. But, having explored how this 38,000-person apparatus protects us from external threats, our source material takes this really fascinating pivot right at the end.
It does. It shifts from the institutional to the deeply personal.
Right. It talks about the fundamental truths of safety. Like, where does true safety actually come from?
Yeah, the author points out that while the FBI and other agencies are out there protecting citizens, true safety, ultimate protection, actually comes from living the gospel.
By keeping the commandments.
Exactly. The idea is that keeping the commandments of God inherently helps you obey the law of the land.
There's the scripture they quote, right, from Psalms.
Yeah, Psalms chapter 1, verse 33, it says, "Whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil."
Quiet from fear of evil. I really love that phrasing.
It's very powerful.
It is, and it makes me want to ask you, the listener, right now, what are some things you can do to stay safe? And really think about this. How does keeping the commandments of God help you obey the law? It's a great question to reflect on, because it really highlights how macro-level protection, like the FBI, works hand in hand with micro-level personal obedience.
Right, because if you're internally committed to a moral compass, you aren't out there committing the crimes that require a federal agent to track you down.
This raises an important question about how external federal laws and internal moral compasses are actually fundamentally aligned. They both aim to create a society that is, as the scripture says, quiet from the fear of evil.
That is such a profound way to look at it. Well, we have covered so much ground today.
We really went from the 1800s to today.
We did, taking you from the Civil War Treasury girls cutting currency to the early private eyes, through J. Edgar Hoover's sprawling fingerprint files, all the way to today's 38,000-strong FBI.
It's an incredible evolution.
It really is, and ultimately this history is anchored in that foundational truth we just talked about, that true safety is achieved through righteous living and keeping the commandments. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We saw how the FBI evolved from chasing 19th century land fraudsters to tracking international art thieves and animal abusers today.
The crimes just keep changing.
They do. So what entirely new, completely unfathomable category of crime do you think the FBI will be tracking 100 years from now to keep our society safe?
Oh, wow. Cybercrimes we can't even imagine yet, probably.
Right. It's something to think about. Also, if you want more on this, our sources mention a fantastic little video. It's exactly 1 minute and 53 seconds long called The History of the FBI.
Highly recommend checking that out for even more visual context.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, there is always more to learn. Catch you next time. Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.